Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
So,
Yes.
where is this lady today? Are you convinced that you could see her today? That she's around?
Yeah.
Even though she's not who she said she was, you can see her. Anything that gives you any desire to have what you don't have. One time I was planning a mission trip to Mexico, and I made good money where I worked. I was doing all right. I was able to go out and buy another car just to drive to Mexico. And then my money ran out. And I was praying. And something happened to my other vehicle and had to repair it, and all the money I was taking to go down there. And I was taking my oldest son and his friend and another man from the church. I was paying for everything. And I had no money, and it was only a week before we left. And I was praying, I said, God, I know you wanted me to go. And he said, but I never told you you had to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then it would have been you going. And that night I got a phone call from a man. He said, I know you've got money. You don't need money. But I believe I want to help you to go to Mexico. By the time we left, we were able to go down there. We were able to leave money to help to build a church. You understand how God is? So whatever is needed, He will supply it. But He doesn't supply what we want. Okay? Sometimes, though, He supplies us some luxuries that we might think are luxuries, but He supplies it to us. Just because He's who He is. It's like our children. Sometimes we just feel like giving them something. That's just to remind you that you're here.
I think the pocket door open, we have to give a bit more draft.
Yeah. There should be a chair out there or something.
Oh, boy.
Didn't see that one coming.
No, Diamond didn't see that one coming.
There.
I sit over here.
So we all know the scripture that says, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. That's her philosophy today. That's not a good thing to have in you, by the way.
No.
So anytime we might think we're worshiping self, but what we're actually worshiping is her. She's the one that began this. Okay? And in the beginning, it was like a religion. Okay? But now, religions are changing to her. You see what it is? She was the religion, but now religions are taking her on. Any religion that amasses money, we used to go to this church we were saved into. They believed that they shouldn't have bank accounts. But they had a bank account, so every end of December, they would gather together and decide and choose places where they could give the money that had come. And they would give it all away and start the next year new. But today, churches are gaining wealth. And not everyone, but churches are gaining wealth. They're gaining things that, and spending it on things that I don't think was God's plan for the money. He says, I will bless you that you can bless others. Okay? Not to spend on yourself, but to bless others.
There are quite a few pastors on these mega churches that have huge mansions, like huge,
And jet airplanes.
and jet airplanes. And it's interesting to see how when Bible talks about hoarding wealth, and they are talking about God, preaching about God, and they don't realize this.
That's right, because there was this one TV evangelist, I won't tell you his name, he came to Kenya. And he flew in his jet. And of course, he's so big and powerful and rich that the president invites him to a breakfast. That they were selling tickets to the breakfast. It was about $250 US dollars to go have breakfast with this evangelist and the president. And the place was packed. And he got up in this place and he said, I'm only here for a short time this time, but I want to come back and speak to all the leaders and tell them how to run this country. Totally,
To power.
he was exerting power over even the president of the country. And the president invited him to his own home. He said, yeah, I'll be there. Then after the meeting, after he finished his stuff, he went, got on his plane and flew home. Never went to his house.
Okay.
Wow.
But this guy, I mean, when you hear him preach, you can tell what spirit he's from if you're looking for it with the spirit. But there's many people follow this guy and send him money, lots of money. Because some people get the attitude, if somebody is prosperous, they must be right, because God's blessing them. So we should bless them too. It's a trap.
No,
See,
even they distort that teaching where it says in the Bible, sow in good ground.
mhm.
And they preach it like their church is a good ground and they can sow in that church.
I heard another evangelist talking about the sowing. And he was talking like how his income was dropping. This is one of the evangelists with a mansion and all these things. And he had all these prayer letters.
Yeah.
He was on TV and he said, I'm going to pray for all
I
these
guess I know
people.
who you're talking about.
And I want you to send money for all these prayers. He said, God is wanting me to do these things, and God will bless you if you give to me. And I'm thinking, why isn't God going to bless you if you give?
Yeah.
Why aren't you up there giving, and then you will receive? I found over the years, one time I was in a church, and God said, give everything in your pocket into the offering. And the next day I was traveling to Nairobi. The money in my pocket was to take us to Nairobi. So I reached in my pocket, I didn't even count how much money. I put it in the offering. When I got home, we prepared to go to Nairobi the next day. I had no money. Stopped at the post office. There was an envelope full of money.
Wow.
And that's a miracle in itself, because money's not safe in the post office.
Yeah.
Okay? But God blessed because we blessed.
Wow.
If I would have kept back enough money to get me to Nairobi, I wouldn't have been blessed like that. But we get blessed so we can give. Peter said, silver and gold have I not, but such as I have I give you. Okay. We aren't always able to give what God wants us to give because we're trusting in the money.
Well, I guess like just as a question, is there truly a great man of God that the Lord has blessed them with wealth? That their hearts are pure and that they use the money for a good cause, whether they are in the marketplace or they are pastors or evangelists or.
There are some people who have been really blessed by God. Some years ago, I was working in this mine, and one of the equipment that we were working on was this great big front end loader. I mean, it lifted 7 tons in one scoop. But it was a Letourneau. And I started studying about Letourneau. The man that owned that company used to be a poor mechanic. And he learned about tithing. So he started to tithe. And God started giving him visions. And pretty soon he was a multi-millionaire. But every time God increased his money, he increased how much he tithed. Now tithe means 10%. But pretty soon he was given 15, 20, 25. And at the time when I was researching it, he was given 95% of his income to God's work. And somebody asked him, how can you live on 5%? He said, $5 million a year is pretty good. He said, I can't outgive God. Every time I give more, he gives me more. But he developed this mighty, great big, it was electric, that's why I worked on it. But it was a big machine. It wouldn't even fit in this room.
Wow.
The bucket wouldn't fit in here. But you see, it was because he was using the money God blessed him with to bless others. Okay? So you can't outgive God. Sometimes we don't have because we don't give. I was only saved for a short time, and God caused me to fast. I think I told you before. And I fast, and all God spoke to me was tithe. I had no idea. We were in a church that didn't even take offerings. I had to ask my wife, because she was saved 9 months longer than me. So I said, what does tithe mean? She said, I've been praying that you would ask about tithing. So she told me what tithing was. And at that time, we were very broke. I was charging gas so I could drive to work. And on payday, all our bills were more than what the paycheck was. But I said, I'm going to tithe. That was back in '79. I had on my credit cards $25,000 debt. I had just bought a house. I started tithing. God started blessing. In 1 year, all my debts were wiped out. My house was paid for. Okay. So I know that when you give, and I start giving more. One time I worked extra hours and I was doing nothing. The mine was flooding, and I had to run some pumps, me and another guy, to drain the mine. So all I was doing was making sure there was electricity there to run the pumps, and he was making sure the pumps were still running. So we were there for a long time, so I made a bundle of money. And I thought, boy, it's going to be good when payday comes. God said, that's not for you. And he told me a man to send it to. And so when I got that money, straight off to him. Then, when I became a missionary, this man started supporting us. He still supports us. Okay? See, God was prepared. But I had to be obedient to what he said. Instead of thinking, oh, what can I do with all of this money? You
So-
understand?
I wanted to add to that. It's an interesting principle when it comes to tithing because it has brought me so much faith and the prosperity that God talks about. I have seen it happen in my life because I've always had old cars. I never had a new car. But my pastor, when she was teaching about tithe, I realized one thing. True prosperity doesn't mean that you're going to hold wealth and you're going to get a lot of stuff. True prosperity means that whatever you have will last you so long that you don't need to have new things. You don't need to have anything that looks new or whatever. It's God's blessing that will keep anything you have going. And I've seen it in my life, in my cars, in my health. When I tell people about certain things with my health, people are shocked and amazed. And I'm like, this is what actually prosperity means. Like, you have nothing to lose. Everything is a plus. Purely because you have followed a principle that God
That's
wanted
right.
you to do.
That's right. Yeah.
It's
That's true. You see, talking about old vehicles, I told you about my old truck I had.
Yeah.
I loved that old truck. Had 950,000 kilometers on it.
I was blessed.
So I believe the Lord allowed it to be stolen so he could bless me with a new one. Because I would have kept that forever. And he gave me a better one. Okay. And I almost kept it forever. So now here's where I might step on some toes. Today, religion's worth a lot of money. Her religion. Okay. We can get a lot if we worship her, if we follow her ways. Right down to the 25th of September. Her child, who she said was Nimrod reborn, was born on the 25th of December. For many years it was celebrated as Child's Day. Okay? What they would do was put gifts under trees outside for the children. Remind you of anything?
Yeah.
And probably every one of us celebrated her last Christmas. Okay. She doesn't give gifts for free. There's something she wants in return. This is where some people can't grasp what I'm saying. Jesus was not born on December 25th.
Yeah.
So I don't care if you celebrate his birth on that day. That's no problem. But when we're celebrating Santa Claus and Christmas, that's when we're celebrating her. Okay? And if we could only, I remember the Lord gave me a message to preach one time on Christmas Day. Because everybody is celebrating the baby Jesus. Okay? There are some religions that have Jesus still on the cross.
Mm.
But we celebrate him as still a baby. Okay? Now he had to become a baby to grow up and be what he was. But nobody was saved or healed by the baby Jesus.
Yeah.
And we celebrate him on her day. I like to, what I preached that day, I got the biggest man in the church to come lay on the floor. Like a baby. I said, Jesus isn't still in the cradle. He's not still on the cross.
Yeah.
He's risen.
Hallelujah.
That's who we're celebrating. Of course he had to be born. It's okay to celebrate his birth, but also celebrate his resurrection at the same time. It was by his death and resurrection that we have anything.
Can I tell a story?
Sure.
So, not last Thursday, but Thursday before that, because I was here. My daughter, when we got in the car after we left Bible school, she goes, "Mom, can you get us made a shirt with Jesus, but not dead? He has to be alive, because Jesus rose again." And then I was like, "Yeah, for sure, we could do that, right?" And then, like, her babysitter, they're Catholics, and they gave them a rosary, right, with Jesus dead on the cross. And so we had it, like, they have them up in their room, right? And then, so anyway, so she says to me, "Mom, we have Jesus dead on the cross in our rooms. Why do we have that?" Oh my God. So I started freaking out. So I called Trudy. I'm like, "Oh my God, what do I do about these rosaries?" Because they're a gift, right? And she's like, and then so my daughters are like, let's just cut off the cross. We'll throw out the cross because they like the necklace, right?
So the
So that's-
necklace is, tell them that's made of shells. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
beads.
The shells and beads, yeah. So I cut off the shells, I cut off the cross, and we dumped it in the garbage.
Wow.
And now they have their shells. And I was like, "Wow, you're great."
she's
Because I didn't like those rosaries anyways, right? But I had them because I felt bad and I didn't know what to do,
What do I do with them?
But they're like, "Yeah, no, we can't have this." They should be. Yeah.
No.
They teach me more than I they do.
We can learn from our kids
Oh,
sometimes.
definitely. They keep us.
Turning off the
Yeah.
TV.
Yeah. Taking Jesus off the cross.
But the thing is,
It's awesome.
if we don't understand what we're doing, we can be worshiping her and not know it. Okay? Yeah, my same son who turned off the TV, we were driving down the road and there was a Santa Claus parade.
Mm.
And they had a fire truck and Santa Claus was on the top. My son said, "Dad, you want me to go punch him?" I said, "No, we as Christians, we don't believe in him, but we don't go and punch him." But he was thinking, "Yeah, but he's lying to all these people." Okay. And if someone was going to believe in Santa Claus, I should have believed in Santa Claus. Because when I was a kid, we were poor. My father was in prison more than he was out. And so we were poor. My mother was raising all us kids. So what they would do, the fire department would gather toys and things, and they'd come and give them to the poor people. So we were some of the poor people. So they had this big Santa Claus every year come into our house and give us food and toys and everything else. But even back then, I knew this man isn't real. I didn't know God. I didn't know Jesus. I knew none of that. But I knew this man isn't real. You understand? But today there's even Christians that are trying to tell their children, "Oh, this present comes from Santa Claus.
Yeah, that's really sad. I said to parents, don't ever do that.
Yeah,
You're
Yeah.
deceiving your child.
Yeah.
And so if Santa Claus all of a sudden tells Santa Claus is make-believe, well then, probably God's make-believe too.
yeah,
Whose
They're the
make-believe
man.
do you want?
That's
So
right.
I said, don't ever do that. You gotta say, look, at Santa Claus is not real, right from when they can understand it.
that's
That
right.
they never ever feel like they've been betrayed.
And the other thing is, when they grow up and learn about God, then they think God is a Santa Claus.
Oh, yeah.
Then they think, everything I ask for, I'll receive, because the Word says
The
that.
word says.
You know, but that's not what it's saying.
Yeah.
You understand? When we receive everything He wants in His will, then we'll receive it.
And if we actually compare Santa Claus, what the world sees Santa Claus, to Jesus, there's so many similarities.
That's right.
So many, like, you know, Santa Claus works in a workshop with, you know, works with wood. Jesus was a carpenter, right? Like, so many things that, like, Santa Claus, like, you know, God, Jesus gives to everybody, right? Santa Claus gives to everybody, right? Santa Claus is all-knowing, God is all-knowing, like, stuff like that, right?
Well,
There's so many similarities.
that's why if we will come and worship her, she will give to us.
Well, if you unscramble Santa's name, it spells Satan.
Chelsea, this clause.
Yeah, but you understand, that's what Revelation is telling us. There's God's kingdom and Satan's kingdom, and they line up all the way. You know,
Satan has to mirror Jesus, right?
well, because he's not right. He can't come up with something on his own. So God is true, so he's got to add his own truth. Okay, that's what the Antichrist is. The Antichrist is not saying Jesus isn't real. It's saying, look at ours. Okay. She's saying, look at mine. You celebrate Jesus on this day? Look at ours. You'll get something. You'll get something for free. You see? And, you know, I'm not singling out a single denomination or anything else, but we all have to be aware
Yeah.
of what's going on around us. We all have to be aware that there is a devil, okay? And he's got people working for him. And we have to stand up, we have to come against these things that are coming against God's people. We have to make a stand. Verse 18, chapter 18, verse 1. Then I saw another angel descending from heaven, possessing great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his radiance and splendor. And he shouted with a mighty voice, "She is fallen." Okay. Now this one before was claiming power. It was riding on power. Okay? But here, an angel descending from heaven, possessing, he has great authority. And the earth was illuminated with his radiance. Where he comes, there is light. Okay. And he shouted with a mighty voice, "She is fallen." Okay, this one we're hearing about, the one that has been there for almost 4,000 years now. He's saying is fallen. Now he said this 2,000 years ago. Okay. Mighty Babylon is fallen. She has become a resort and dwelling place for demons, a dungeon haunted by every loathsome spirit, an abode for every filthy and detestable bird. All that you can think that is evil is in her. Okay? But like I say, you don't know it till you get in there. On the outside, if the devil didn't come as an angel of light, we wouldn't look at him. If it didn't look appealing, if sin looked gross,
Nobody would do it.
nobody would do it. I've got a testimony I want to tell you because it's just burning inside. I was going to save it for our teaching on healing, but I don't think I've told you this one. But one day we were in class. We had a pastor visiting from Canada, and he was teaching a course in our school. We came from the class, and there was a young lady about 18, 19 years old there. And I didn't know who she was. And she was waiting to talk to me. I said, okay, what can I do for you? She said, while I was praying, there's a sick man in our village, and I was praying for him, and God spoke to me and said, go get Bob to come. I said, okay. That's fine. Where's your village? It was 32 kilometers. She had walked down to see me. Because God had told her. So I get the pastor and man from our Bible school, and we drive up there, and she takes us through these places. We couldn't actually drive to where the man lived. We had to walk for a few kilometers. And we got there, walked in the house, and the man's laying in bed, paralyzed, totally paralyzed for 6 months. This girl had been praying for him for 6 months. He wasn't saved. He had AIDS. And I said, well, if God wants me to come, and on the way, I said, how do you even know me? When God said, go get Bob, how did you know me? Well, I preached in a church in her village when she was about 12 years old. And there were so many people packed into this church, I couldn't have an altar call. So I said, if anyone's sick anywhere, put your hand where you're sick. And she had disease in her shoulder. She couldn't lift her arms. And so she went like this. And then we sang a worship song after, and she went like this. So that's how she knew Bob. So when God said, go get Bob, so I said, okay, then God's going to heal him. There's no doubt. But the man that I took with me, he started preaching to him. I said, no, don't do that. He said, but he has to get saved before he can get healed. I said, no, God didn't say that. He just said, go get Bob.
Yeah. Yeah.
I finally had to chase that guy out of the room because he wasn't quitting. The guy's laying there. When we came in, his wife threw a sheet over him. But he was laying there on the bed. So I said, okay, we're going to heal this guy, then we can lead him to the Lord. So I just laid hands on his stomach, didn't pray. And pretty soon his feet started moving. He hadn't moved his feet in 6 months. Pretty soon he swung him over and sat up on the edge of the bed.
Amen.
And I told his wife, no, get him some clothes to put on. We'll wait in the other room. He came out in the other room. And then I talked to him about Jesus. I said it wasn't me that healed. And so he knelt on his knees, him and his wife both, and accepted Jesus.
Amen.
So the thing is, we can twist that, okay, to think it's us. We're important. God called me to come. No, it was just because the faith of the young girl to walk 32 kilometers knowing that God would use me to heal the man.
Amen.
Okay? And that's why I didn't pray. I said, if God called me, He's going to do it. It doesn't matter what I say. But, you know what happened 6 months later? He died of malaria.
Well, he was saved though.
But he was saved, and he was given testimony of the glory
Yes.
of God for 6 months. But he still had the AIDS. So when he got malaria, he couldn't fight it, and he died. All of that to say, her religion wants us to get something, wants us to have something. God's religion wants us to give something to others. Okay? Wants us to give what we have without money to other people. Like Peter said, silver and gold have I none. But what I have I give you. Okay? If God blesses you to be able to give money, you can give money. If it's healing that is needed, you can give healing. I'm just praying for that trip to Haiti, that there's going to be miracles.
Amen.
So much that no one in Haiti can deny there's a God.
Amen.
You know, we can tell people about
Yes.
Him.
When they see.
Well, when they see it, like Job. I heard about you, but now I see you.
Yes, amen.
When they can see, then there's a real change in their life. But if they only come, I preached in a market one time. I hate preaching evangelism, but I was preaching in this market. Thousands of people came. Because market days, many people come to the markets to shop. So they all came because here's this white man dancing around in the front. I used to jump high and stuff like that. I don't anymore. But they came because there was a white man there. You understand? That's why I didn't like preaching evangelism. Because they came for the white man. I want them to come for Jesus. That's why I like teaching other people to do it, over there especially. Because when they evangelize, they're not coming for the white man.
Yeah, but God used the white man to save many people.
Yeah. I mean, I did do preaching and many thousand people got saved. But that's not what my job was. Okay? God did those things as a demonstration of His glory, of what He can do. Because every time He had miracles happen, you see, to demonstrate His glory. So, Babylon is fallen, he says. Doesn't matter what we see with our eyes. See, what we have to do is start looking with the kingdom eyes at what is real. What we see around us isn't what's real. What's real is what God says is real. Okay? Babylon is fallen. For all nations have drunk the wine of her passionate unchastity, and the rulers and leaders of the earth have joined with her in committing fornication. Now we know what that is, idolatry. Okay? And the businessmen of the earth have become rich with the wealth of her excessive luxury and wantonness. I then heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out from her, my people." Remember, I said, you have to be in the Spirit. If you're in the Antichrist church, come out from her. Come out of it. So that you may not share in her sins, neither participate in her plagues. That tells me that there are Christians today worshiping her Otherwise, he wouldn't have to say, come out of her.
Yeah.
Okay? For her iniquities are piled up as high as heaven, and God has remembered her wickedness and crimes. Repay to her what she herself has paid to others, and double, in accordance with what she has done. Mix a double portion for her in the cup she mixed. Okay? Now this is what's going to happen to her. She's riding on the beast. Now, things are going to turn against her. To the degree that she glorified herself and reveled in her wantonness. To that measure, impose on her torment and anguish and tears and mourning. Since in her heart she boasts, I am not a widow, I am a queen. I sit, and I shall never see suffering or experience sorrow. So shall her plagues come thick upon her in a single day, pestilence, anguish, and sorrow, and famine, and she shall be utterly consumed, burned up with fire. For mighty is the Lord God who judges her. Now these things, if we don't come out of her, when the judgment falls on her, it falls on us. Okay. And the rulers and leaders of the earth who joined her in her immorality and luxuriated with her will weep and beat their breasts and lament over her when they see the smoke of her burning. The people who got rich by joining with her will now stand back and look at her and weep because of what they're losing. Okay? They don't want her to fall, because if she falls, all of our good stuff will fall. Okay? That's happening even in America today. They will stand a long way off in terror of her torment, verse 10. And they will cry, woe, and alas, the great city, the mighty city Babylon, in one single hour, how your doom has overtaken you. You remember when the trade centers went down? How long did it take to fall? 1 hour. They crumbled in 1 hour. I remember standing at the top of the trade centers, looking out, and they had maps and things, all this stuff on there. And I thought, why are they building this Tower of Babel? And it was shortly after that, it was down. 1 hour it only took to fall down. Now, don't get me wrong. Don't go away saying, I told you God knocked those towers down. But I'm just giving you an example. It only took an hour for them to fall. It took a long time to build them.
But don't think God allowed that.
God allowed it.
Yeah, so
Yeah. And who did it? The government she's riding on. See, they're starting to fight against each other. So God is going to tell us there. Their merchandise is of gold, silver, precious stone, pearls, of fine linen, purple, silk, scarlet, all kinds of scented wood, all sorts of articles of ivory, all various varieties of objects of costly wood, bronze, iron, marble, cinnamon, spices, all these things. The dealers who handled these articles, who grew wealthy through their business with her, you see, pretty soon, like I say, the bubble's going to pop because it can't just keep growing. Pretty soon you run out of people who are going to buy all this stuff. Okay? We'll stand a long way off in terror of her doom and torment, weeping and grieving aloud, saying, Alas, alas, for the great city that was robed in fine linen, purple, scarlet, bedecked and glittering with gold, with precious stones and pearls. Because in 1 hour all the vast wealth has been destroyed, and all the ships, captains and pilots, navigators, and all who live by seafaring, shipping, transporting these goods. There's a big profit in just transporting the goods. The crews and all who ply their trade on the sea stood a long way off and exclaimed as they watched the smoke of her burning, what city could compare to this great city? Where are we going to make money now? They threw dust on their head and wept and grieved. Woe and alas for the great city where all who had ships on the sea grew rich. There are so many riches on these ships that one country in Africa started pirating these ships. Even in this day, there's pirates in Somalia raiding these ships. Okay? One single hour she has been destroyed and has become a desert. Now, everything, the cargoes, even meaning slaves, okay, men and women, how much there's trade in young girls these days. Sex trade. People are making so much money. I can't imagine myself, but they're making so much money off these things. But when she falls, they're going to weep and wail. We miss that. Rejoice over her, O heaven, O saints, and apostles and prophets, because God has executed vengeance for you upon her. Remember the ones who were crying out, When, Lord? When? How long till you bring judgment? So now, rejoice. Then a single powerful angel took up a boulder like a great millstone and flung it into the sea, crying, With such violence shall Babylon, the great city, be hurled down to destruction, and shall never again be found. We're coming. We haven't reached final judgment yet, but we're coming to it. Okay? And never again shall the light of a lamp shine in you, and voice of bridegroom and the bride shall never be heard in you again. I don't know if anyone here has got married or had a child get married lately. It costs a fortune. So the bride and the bridegroom won't be heard in you again. there's going to come a day when people are going to say no. I remember the first wedding I did in Kenya. This couple wanted to get married, wanted me to marry them in the church. I said, good, on one condition. Just wear the clothes you wear to church on Sunday. Don't go and buy I knew they didn't have money. Don't go and buy even a new dress. Wear the best one you got at home. And I said a lady in the church will build a cake. Because even in Kenya, where they're poor, they can pay hundreds of dollars for a cake. I said, we're not doing that. So one lady made a cake out of millet. It was only about this big. But it was big enough for the two of them to eat. And everyone in the church brought some beans and some maize. We cooked them up, and everybody ate that. At the end of the service, I called them forward and did their wedding. Their wedding cost, in Kenya money, 50 shillings, which was about 75 cents at that time.
Wow.
That's the whole cost of it. I even took the license into Nairobi myself and registered it. So they didn't even have to do that. Okay? Because so many are getting into her with it and going into debt with a marriage. I'm going to, probably not tonight because we're not going to get there, talk to you about what a wedding really is. Okay? We haven't seen weddings today like then. I've done the marriage for 3 of my children and 1 of my grandchildren so far. And they're different weddings. Okay. But I hope you're starting to see something here. That I'm just marking where I am. What we are seeing now is a lot of people are trying to get rich off other people, even in the church. My son, youngest son, when he got married, he said, Dad, I want to get married in a traditional church. So I went to a friend who in the United Church was the most traditional church in town at the time. And I said, can I use your church for a wedding? He said, sure, on one condition. You'll preach on Sunday for me. So he didn't even have to pay for the church. It was donated, just all I had to do was preach on Sunday. Which I was happy to do in the United Church. People got filled with the Spirit, healed that Sunday. But he told me, you can't have an altar call. So I didn't. I just said, where you are. They didn't come to the altar. I said, where you are. Lay hands. One lady was there in church, planning to go home and kick her husband out. And she laid hands on her heart, had a change of heart. On the way home, she found out she was as much to blame as her husband. She went home and made it right with her husband. You know, God can change things, but we don't have to spend all this money. We don't have to worship this harlot. And that's what we're doing. In so many things we're doing in the church. I've only been back here a couple of years, so I refer a lot to the church in Kenya. Everybody's wedding has to be bigger than the last person's wedding. An average wedding this is in the bush, not in the city. Cities are bigger. But in the bush, they have at least 60 people in the wedding party. They have about 20 groomsmen and about
Oh, wow.
20 ladies, and they all have to have special clothes, matching, and then they have these flower girls, and then they even have a wedding director. And she gets paid. And she follows everybody in, and it looks funny because even the bride's coming in and she's spraying her with deodorant and, you know, but they're all getting paid. And then they have to have cakes. And now, one cake isn't enough. They build special stands to hold all the cakes. And it's a big performance. They hire at least 20 ladies to come dancing in, bringing the cakes. And so the next person who gets married has to have a bigger one than that.
Oh my lord.
So now they have to hire vehicles
Oh my lord.
and even buses to carry people. I mean, they might only have to go 2 blocks, but they have to have all these vehicles. You understand? They're spending money they don't have. And it's all in worship of her. So we in the church have to change things. Good. Any questions?